علمي من الرحمن ذي الآلاء بالله حزت الفضل لا بدهائي كيف الوصول إلى مدارج شكره نثني عليه وليس حول ثنائي.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the philosophy of the teachings of Islam, a program in which we review the masterpiece of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. Our viewers, previously we saw the background of the book. My name is Kadeku Mumin Qasim, and with me is the Sheikh Ramadan Kabagambe, and we shall be joined by Sheikh Ismail Rutaliga, one of the scholars in the Jamaat Ahmadiyya. Now, Sheikh Sahib will be helping us to understand some of the impacts of the book at the time of its presentation and to date. Sheikh Sahib, you told us previously in our last episode that one of the students of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam presented this book. May you remind us what the situation was on the presentation of the book?
Yes. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let me start with that specific time of the conference when it was being presented by the follower of Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, his companion called Maulvi Abdul Hakim Sahib Sialkoti. The people were always increasing in number, as in many people came to attend so that they could hear and listen to what Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam had to say about the 5 questions that were set before the conference started. According to one of the reporters, they were ranging from between 7,000 to 8,000 people. And that was different when other speakers were speaking. Whenever other speakers were speaking, we could find, according to the reporters, that the numbers were less. But whenever they knew that Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam's work was to be presented, they always increased in number. They were to give two hours to each and every speaker to present his work. And of course, Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam's work was to be presented also like other speakers in 2 hours. But the 2 hours that were given went by, were eaten up, were exhausted without answering answers, all of them. As in, they were all used up and the answer to only one question was not even complete. So you could see that there was a need to see what to be presented after. And people were always in suspense. What comes after? And unanimously, they agreed. And the organizers had no choice but to extend the time. They added 2 more hours to that work. Still, it was not complete. One man called Maulvi Abu Yusuf also gave and donated his own time because he was to speak next after the work of the promised Messiah. He said, my time, okay, you can use it. It was also used, but still, you know, the book was not complete. So they requested that the next day, the work of the promised Messiah should be started with. and the organizers had no any option but to accept. According to one of the reporters, he reported that before the allotted time tomorrow morning, the next day morning, before the time of the conference that was to start, the hall was already full, because they knew that the work, this masterpiece of work, was to be presented first. So they came early. Like I told you, they listened with rapt attention, with pinned-up silence. Nobody was speaking to any other. They were all giving attention to the essay and the work of the promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam. So that tells you that it had a lot of content and people were interested in listening to it. And it did not stop there. When it came to the people to decide who actually won among all the speakers, they all accepted that the work of the promised Messiah was supreme. And that tells you that whenever Allah, the Almighty, promises, He fulfills. The Quran has already told us, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَأَغْلِبَنَّ أَنَا وَرُسُلِي. Allah has decreed that He will reign supreme. He will win together with His messengers. Remember, I told you that Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, whenever he was writing his books, he would be helped by God Almighty directly. And when it came to this book itself that we are talking about, Allah had already revealed to him that Mazmun Bararaha, this book of yours is going to be the best. And this is exactly what transpired. By what took place, by what I have just told you, of what happened in the conference, of people getting interested, of people increasing in numbers, people listening without talking to each other, tells you that people got interested in what Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam was to speak to them. You see, that is what Allah says, and when He promises, He fulfills. And this is exactly what we saw that happened at the time of the conference, and we see it even today. Because whenever you get a chance of presenting this book to any other person, not even an Ahmadi, not even a Muslim, any person of any creed or faith, you'll be amazed that they will confess that this book is the best when it comes to defending the beauties and the verities of Islam.
We are discussing the impact of the book to us and those at its presentation. Sheikh Sahib, this committee had a secretary. The secretary was also interested in what the promised Messiah alayhi salam said or wrote. What was the comment of the secretary?
The comment, you allow me to read it verbatim and see what he himself said, because it will be difficult for me to paraphrase it, because paraphrasing sometimes kills the real message. The secretary of the conference, who was Dampat Roy, the pleader chief court of Punjab, he wrote, and I quote, "There was an interval of half an hour following the speech of Pandit Godan Das Sahib, as the next item on the agenda was the speech presented on behalf of a renowned advocate of Islam. Most people did not live at their place. The large Islamia College building began to fill up long before 1:30 p.m. The gathering numbered between 7,000 and 8,000 people. Educated and knowledgeable people from various religions and nations were present, and although plenty of tables, chairs, and floor space had been provided, still hundreds of attendees were left with no choice but to stand." This tells you that the arrangements were done, chairs were provided, tables were provided, but because there were a lot of people coming, people were left with no space but to stand up, and they still listened to the work of the promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam. He continued to say that the attendees included many dignitaries, leaders from Punjab, scholars, barristers, lawyers, professors, extra assistants, and doctors. In short, different branches of educated society were all present. They stood for 4 to 5 hours listening with great patience and with rapt attention. The writer of the paper did not attend in person, but one of his disciples, Maulavi Abdul Kahim Sialkoti, was delegated to read it at the conference. The committee had allotted 2 hours for each essay. However, it was not finished in it this time. Seeing the avid interest showed by the audience, the moderators willingly agreed to extend the session until the conclusion of the speech. This decision was exact in keeping with the wishes of the participants, and Maulvi Abu Yusuf Mubarak Ali gave in his time for the work of the promised Messiah ﷺ to be completed. These are some of the comments of the secretary of the conference. He also confesses, like I was saying, that people came, a lot of dignity. You don't know what it means, having these, dignitaries in attendance and they have nowhere to sit. And given the fact that they still stood up without bothering themselves, without disturbing to request for chairs, because of course there were no chairs left, or arrangements were done for the chairs. Of course they were there, but they were used up. They were all used, and anybody who came later would have no any other option but to stand up. But they did so, and they stayed there for some good time listening to this work. This tells you that this is not an ordinary work. This is a great book that we must appreciate and give other people to also go through.
If you are there and you haven't yet read Islami Usul Ki Philosophy, the philosophy of the teachings of Islam, that was written and presented at the conference, please visit www.alislam.org. Sheikh Sahib, in many conferences, even to date, we see that news readers or people from other media are invited to the conference. What were some of the news media or the media that was invited, and what did they write?
Yes, whenever any person is invited or is given this book, like I told you in the beginning, they become very amazed. And up to today, take an example. In the newspaper called the Bristol Times and Mirror, it was quoted that surely the man who addresses Europe and America in this manner can be no ordinary being. I mean, I'm now just giving a gist of what they said because it is a long excerpt. But these are people talking about this book. In the Spiritual Journal of Boston, it was stated that the book is good news for the whole human race. The book that we are talking about, the philosophy of the teachings of Islam, that was originally Islami Usul Ki philosophy, is a good news for not only Ahmadis, not only Muslims, but for the whole human race. Then the Theosophical Book Notes wrote, this book is a most beautiful and endearing picture of Muhammad's religion. And today you find somebody saying, Ahmadis do not love Islam. These are people who are there to defend Islam at every cost. So, and this man says that this book endears everybody to the religion of Muhammad, I mean Islam. The Indian Review wrote, this book presents clear thinking and perfect wisdom that and the reader is left with no choice but to praise it. And this is exactly what we see today. This is exactly what we saw at the time of its presentation. And it continues to happen, and it will not cease happening. The Muslim Review says, anyone reading this book is bound to find a great many truths, most deep and pleasing to the soul. I mean, how many newspapers and how many people should I quote? Let us take these ones to be sufficient for the meantime. Otherwise, I can go on citing and citing a lot of people that have good comments about this great book. So I find it very interesting, and I would entreat the viewers to find copies and go through this masterpiece of the promised Messiah.
Thank you very much, our Sheikh Saib. I can only tell you that when you read something to yourself, you understand it best. Go and find the book Islami Usul Ki Philosophy. That is the philosophy of the teachings of Islam, the masterpiece of the promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, we have many people in different countries because this book has been established in several languages in different countries with a lot of care and faithfulness to the original context. Sheikh Sahib, online I've informed my viewers that we have Sheikh Lutaliga Israel. Sheikh Lutaliga Israel, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Please, may you give us some of the impacts of this book to you, because Sheikh Lutaliga Israel is one of the people who have gone deep to read this book and have also interpreted it or translated it in the local languages of Uganda.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, I have been given the opportunity to talk about the impact on me after having read this book, The Philosophy of the Teaching of Islam, written by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the Promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam. There are quite many things that I acquired after having read this book. But it is imperative also at this juncture to inform you that he was giving 5 approaches to understand the philosophy of the teaching of Islam. First, he mentioned the physical, moral, and spiritual status of man. Secondly, the status of man after death. Thirdly, the object of man's life and means of its attainment. Fourth, the operation and the practical ordinances of the law in the life, in this life and the hereafter. Then finally, he talked about the sources of divine knowledge. We all know that when you want to understand Islam, we have 3 main sources of knowledge. That is the Holy Quran, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, and the Hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, when Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi wasallam came to this world after having elected by Allah the Almighty as the Promised Messiah, the Mahdi of this age, he's the servant of the Holy Prophet. So his main purpose was to revive the teaching of Islam. Among his 80 books, he wrote this book known as The Philosophy of the Teaching of Islam. I would like just to mention a few. He talked of the prohibition of swine. However, I took much interest in this. So if you want to know why pork is prohibited, it is imperative upon every believer, whoever you are, to read this book. He also talked about steadfastness, why believers should be steadfast under all circumstances. He also talked about the sympathy for mankind. Finally, I also greatly impressed about how he explained the existence of God. We all know that God exists. But how can you give proof that indeed God exists? So it is imperative upon every believer, men, women, children, to read this book. So I would like to appeal to every believer out there that please you, it is imperative upon you to read this book, not once, not twice, but as many times as possible. After having read this book, I can assure you it's only then that we understand the true teachings and the philosophy and the teachings of Islam. So I would like to appeal to all Muslims out there that if you want your progeny to understand the true teachings of Islam, please and please try to read this book yourself and encourage your household members to read this book as many times as possible. It's only then that we understand the true teachings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We thank Sheikh Israel Taliga for some of his impacts that he got after reading the book. Sheikh Sahib, any supplement?
I could have a lot. You see, Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam explains why some of the things that we are prohibited and told not to do, why are we not supposed to do them? And logically, he's able to convince you. You see, there is that being of, that tendency of believing that, you know, Allah, God exists. But you don't have any proof that God exists. He takes the trouble to explain that you don't need to actually see God with your physical eyes to know that He is actually there. He gives a lot of examples. There are many things that you accept and have firm faith that these things exist, but you have never seen them. He gives examples of, let's say, you know, magnetic force. I mean, everybody accepts that that magnetic force is there. Yes. But nobody has ever seen it. You see, God has got ways of recognizing Him, of understanding that He's really there. Nobody should be there to deny that God is not there, that God is not there, and because he has not seen it. He has not seen God. No. You see, there are people who have already viewed Him, you have talked with Him, and those are actually the prophets and those close to Him. And when they testify that they have seen Him, please don't deny because you have not seen Him. Lack of knowledge of something does not necessarily prove that that thing does not exist. You see, he gives a lot of detailed examples that we can go through and testify that God actually exists. And many other examples that Sheikh Sabo was talking about. Many. We can go on explaining and you will not be exhausted and you will not be tired. So let me take on this for the meantime, but the book is worth reading.
Dear viewers, we would wish to continue from there, but ever time is against us. Rather, I will send you to www.alislam.org, where you will find many teachings of the true Islam, that is Ahmadi. And you will also get the book Islami Usul Ki Philosophy on the same website. Allow me invite or tell you about the other spiritual programs that are oncoming. We shall meet next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
علمي من الرحمن ذي الآلاء بالله حست الفضل لا بدهائي كيف الوصول إلى مدارج شكره نثني عليه وليس حول ثناء